By the time Darrell and I was getting married, my parents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. His parents were divorced. So we had those two scenarios, like what makes a marriage have longevity? What's going to make our marriage have longevity? And so we had goals for our marriage. We sat down and we decided what was going to happen in and outside of our marriage. And just mutually loving one another, mutually respecting one another, and attempting to make sure that we're meeting each other's needs. We focus on meeting the other person's needs instead of focusing on getting what I want in a selfish way.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. On today's episode, we're joined by Darrell and Veronica Williams. Darrell and Veronica, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. And we'll start off the way we start off every show by giving you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. So who are Veronica and Darrell Williams?
So Veronica and Darrell Williams are very close friends that have been married for 23 years. It's amazing. We actually went to middle school and high school together in California, but we never dated, just had the same friends. And then after high school, our lives kind of took different paths. I chose the route of the military. She went to college, stayed in California. And then we reconnected at our 10-year reunion. And we're just good friends, right? Just kind of stayed connected after that. And then eventually the friendship blossomed into something that neither one of us really expected, but are definitely glad that it did, because we can't even imagine being without each other now.
What a story. And I mean, the interesting thing is, obviously, when people start dating, they're friends first, but you guys legit were friends first with no expectation. So it's also interesting to see how that forms, right? Because then it's not like you skip that having to get to know each other part, because you guys already knew each other, right?
Yeah. Well, there was, so if I understand correctly, there was a bit of a 10-year break there with, between when you last saw each other and the reunion. So I guess, there's an opportunity for some things to change, but ultimately you guys had that foundation already.
Yes. And, after our 10-year reunion, we got together. A mutual friend had called me, hey, do you remember Darrell? We saw him at the reunion. I said, yes. He wants your number, but I didn't want to just give it to him without your permission. I said, oh, yeah, you can give it to him. And so they were all going to be getting together. He was coming to town to go out, to dinner. However, every time he's come to town, I never was able to go. So but I worked a different shift where I was off on every Friday. He had a break one day, so we met for lunch, and that's really how it happened. And then it took conversations long distance wise, and I would say it was New Year's 1997 when there was a shift in our relationship, or our friendship at the time. We had talked for several hours. We were 3 hours apart because he was on the East Coast, I was on the West Coast. And talking to him for several hours, I had plans to go out with some friends, and I was like, oh, I gotta go. They're gonna be coming here within 30 minutes. I gotta shower, get myself together, right? But I was having so much fun. So I went with my friends. I got back home. Back then we had voicemail. He left a voicemail message for me. We were both strong in our faith. We were both active in our churches, on the East Coast and the West Coast. We both did youth ministry. At the same time, we were living lives of abstinence, and when I got back home and I got that voicemail message, I was like, oh Lord, I'm not gonna call him back for 3 days. I said, you answer in 3 days. It seems like that tone was a little bit of a shift. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Eventually we did talk, and it was on a Wednesday, because that year, I think New Year's was on a Sunday or something. So it was a Wednesday when we did connect. And I remember that because we both had Bible study. We were both a part of adult single Bible study. So we knew when I got home, he would always call or whatever, but he didn't call until that third day. And I knew I was going to have to face up, but I had to get things together in my mind. Like, what am I going to say? And that's when the shift took place, that he asked me, how would you like to take our relationship a little further? And so, of course, I thought about it. I said, well, I really want to pray about it, because I knew that tone a couple of days ago was going to be a little different. And I said, but the only thing I'm going to say to you is that you're going to have to do something that is a little taboo in today's times. And that is, you're going to have to court me. I want to know that I am going to be number one, because I don't like playing second fiddle. And to be honest with you, what we've developed I really never had to really commit in a relationship. Of course, I went out with guys. I thought I probably knew I wasn't number one. How back then they date you and someone else, and you might get the call. But at that point in my life, I was so secure that at this point I was like, if I meet somebody, fine. If I don't, I'm okay in my singleness. And I said, well, let's date with a purpose. What are you looking for in dating? What is it to be your girlfriend? Which is so, back then is such a time where people weren't talking about that. But being from a woman of faith in my young years, I knew that I had to date with a purpose, because I wasn't going to do some of the things that single women and single men do just without commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you were okay with ultimately if you were by yourself for the rest of time, and Darrell, it sounds like you wanted to graduate from that singles study.
Exactly, because it was amazing. Again, I was in the military, I was in DC, and I had an assignment to go to Korea for a year. So it was really kind of twisted, because I respected her so much as a friend. I was almost trying to cover up my feelings at first. It's like, I can't think about her other than that, because in my mind, it wouldn't be fair to have her waiting for me when I'm going for a year. So it was kind of like I was trying to tell myself, okay, don't think about her other than just as a friend, right? But not realizing, like, no, this is the one. You just got to go with the flow here, because there's a bigger plan than you can imagine.
Right. So I guess that at that point, you don't get, that's not the type of commitment you get out of. So there was an element of a long distance relationship as well.
Yes, this was an element of a long distance relationship, and also me being a civilian, having to be dating someone that's in the military, far away. Now, mind you, he had taken trips back and forth, and we would see each other like that, but never like, I hadn't come to DC yet, like to see if there was any other women, but I trusted in my heart that was it. After we talked, I think, I want to say by March, he was branding me. I should have wore it. He sent me a pin. I never think about wearing it. He sent me a pin that had DW on it. So I got it out of the mail, and I was like, this is interesting. I guess he want to brand me, right? So we talked about that, and we had become so comfortable with each other as far as friends. I mean, we talked about everything under the sun. And for me, when you're getting to this vulnerable point in a relationship where you have to be more open, I had to make sure that he was trustworthy of my heart, and vice versa. Even though we were friends, because it takes a shift. You hear in relationships, they change after the relationship shifts. And so I was like, I don't know what that really means. I mean, I thought I was in a relationships with people before, but I know that I wasn't really making a commitment, and I knew that they weren't really the one. I knew that they weren't going to marry me. I've had people say, God told me you were the one and that you're going to be my wife. And I would respond to them, well, why didn't he tell me? You're going to even, for you to say that out of your mouth, I would know instantaneously. But I said, that's not what he told me. I wasn't feeling that for you. So, but with Darrell, it was a little different, because I was now at a point, it was going to be, long term. We were thinking long term. We talked about everything. And even when there were difficult topics, I would always pray about it. And by the time I talked to him, he would already bring up that subject matter. So that made it easy. And for us, whatever was in, whatever we heard about other people saying, they shift after you get married, that didn't really happen for us. We really kind of remain friends, remain committed to one another, and we did not have that shift. So we're even when we talk to other couples and we have facilitated Bible studies with other couples, we try to be as transparent as possible. But our story is so unlike the average person that gets together or began the dating process and the engaged process, as well as being married ultimately.
And, it's interesting. I was even just thinking about when we were dating too, when all of a sudden it goes from me just making my own decisions and, different things like that to all of a sudden it's like, oh, I feel like, not that I have to, but it's just that connection of, let me touch base and see like what Brian thinks about this, right? Because that the next stage is going to be engagement. The next stage is going to be marriage. You're no longer making those decisions on your own. So I'm thinking for Darrell of, obviously your plan was to go abroad and, how did that all play out being together?
So that was interesting. So right before I was going to Korea, the job that I had is a lot of travel. And the last couple of months, since I had so much experience in my organization, they put me on the recruiting team and said, hey, can you, for your last couple of months, just travel with us so we can, really pick out some really sharp individuals? I'm like, sure, that's gravy for me. And one of the trips I went on was Seattle, Washington. And I'm like, man, this is a really nice area, really cool. And then by the time I got my orders to Korea, you had to pick out where you're going to fly out of. So originally, I think I was flying out of St. Louis. And at that time, Veronica and I were getting real serious. And I was like, I had a roommate and he and I would have our little hallway talk. And he was like, man, what if she's the one? And I'm like, the one what? And he's like, the one. And I'm like, I never thought of it like that. I just never thought of her like that. But the more we talked and the more I prayed about it, I was like, you know what? She's the one. And it got to the point, I was like, no, I don't want her to have to wait a year, right? I want to let her know before. And she had no idea that I was getting this serious, right? So once I made up my mind, like, okay, this is it, right? Went out and got the ring, right? Taking a huge chance, right? And then I called back to the military guys, like, hey, is there another place I can fly out of instead of St. Louis? I'm thinking somewhere on the West Coast. And they're like, oh yeah, you can fly to Seattle if you want. I'm like, bet, let's do that. So I started putting the plan together, right? Called the hotel that we were gonna stay at. And so we had the different rooms set up. But what she didn't know was, since I was there before and they remembered me, I was like, hey guys, I'm gonna let you know that I'm gonna propose while I'm at your hotel. So I know you guys had a real nice area that was kind of top of the restaurant. He's like, oh yeah, like the center place. It's like, yeah, if I can just get that booth, that would be perfect. Talk to my man, the waiter, right? And told him like, hey, I'm gonna give you this ring. It's gonna be in the box. And I said, I already know how she is. She's not gonna want dessert. All right, so I'm gonna order my dessert. And I was like, no, go ahead and put hers underneath the other dish, but bring them both out. Because she's gonna say she didn't want it, but you just leave it anyway. And sure enough, when the day showed up and she came and said, hey, it's kind of freshen up and we'll go out to dinner. Went to the restaurant and had a regular food. And I had, we in the military, so I didn't practice this speech over and over. I was ready to give this thing. I was ready. And then my man James came up and said, you guys have dessert? Sure enough, on cue, she was like, no, I'm good. And I was like, yeah, I'll take an apple pie. And then he brought out the 2 dishes and it was so funny because he was like, here's your pie. I was like, thank you, James. You know it, right? And then we just started talking some more. Then I went into the speech and she was kind of like, okay, where is he going with this? Then I got on the one knee and raised up the dish. The ring was there. James had it set up perfectly. And I asked her, would she marry me? Funny part was I had to wait for the answer because she started hyperventilating.
You were really caught off guard.
Yes, because for one, even in our dating process and getting to know each other, I'm from a large family. I'm the youngest. And my oldest sister is the only one that knew about Darrell. I didn't tell my mom. No one knew, just my oldest sister and her husband. They're the only ones that knew. I don't know how and so I was like, how am I going to go back home with this ring on my finger and tell my parents that I'm engaged and they haven't even met the guy, right? And so, but what we did is I got it together. I did. I had to bring out a brown bag. I had to breathe a little bit because we weren't really going to talk about that because I had already just mentioned to him, you're going to Korea. If you meet someone and you feel like you want to be with them, go ahead. That's fine. I said, if I meet someone, no hard feelings here. We've had a good rodeo, right? But that wasn't what Darrell wanted. And so he proposed and I hyperventilated.
What a
Never
story.
thought that day. Girls have dreams when they're little, about getting married and all of that. I had no clue. We talked about it hypothetically, what it would look like or whatever, but we never gave any. I wasn't thinking that it was going to happen then because I'd already, so I thought, pushed him away to say, we'll wait, till you get back.
And it was so funny because, I'm a traditionalist, so I really wanted to talk, to Dad, right? So she was like, okay, we got to call our parents, right? So, called my parents. They were cool. They were happy for me. Called our parents. And I'll never forget, Dad was like, nice meeting you. Good to hear that news. Looking forward to meeting you. No congratulations, or it was like, you might have asked her, but that's still another step up in that.
Fair enough, because it's not even like you can FaceTime at that point. He's really just getting getting the voice.
And we didn't even have FaceTime on the phone. We were still having flip phones in 92. It was flip phones. So anyway, we got engaged. I went home. I showed my family. Now my family all know that I'm engaged. And a little while after that, he sent me a plane ticket. And so we spent that year Thanksgiving in Korea, so I can really see what it's like being married or being in the military. Of course, it's a lot different from the United States, so it was a really good eye-opener. But I enjoyed myself, and we actually planned the whole wedding while we were there. And we had made arrangements. He was going to get a mid-tour break. And so I had booked our premarital counseling at my church because he was going to come to California to spend that time, get to know my family, meet my parents, and that was it.
And I was going to do the right thing and make sure I asked Dad for her hand in marriage, even though she was already past 30. But I was going to do the right thing, right? And it was cool because, coming back there, that's one thing we both talked about. We really want to make sure we have premarital counseling, right? We don't want to step into this, without utilizing all the resources that were available. And that's one thing we always share with couples. You're going to make a big decision like that. Why not invest in something that can really help lay that foundation? So I was excited, right, to, hook up with Pastor Hay, who was their marriage minister at that time. And just a really, really cool experience, right? Just to go through that whole thing. And he knew that we were going to do half of it, during that time and then do the second part when I came back. And then I loved when I was, when we got there, because when she picked me up at the airport, it was like, okay, you about to meet with Mom and Dad. Man, I'm like a veteran, been in the military. I'm on my last 6 years. I'm like, I got this. I got a career, right? No baggage. I'm good. But Veronica had to remind me, she was the youngest. So her parents depended a lot on her. A lot of her other family members were married. And then by me being the oldest, it was just a whole opposite vibe there. Because, kind of like when you're old, it's like, when I say go, I'm good, And I had to remember she had a different type of relationship. So I had to really take that into account. And when I went to talk to her father, it was so cool because he was a sports fan, right? Man of faith. So we were talking so much about sports that we were back there a little bit longer than they thought. So probably her and her mom was like, what are they talking about back there? What's taking so long? And then we're finally like, oh, you wanted to say something. I was like, oh, yes, yeah. Mr. Morrow, definitely love your daughter. I think she's the one that God sent my way. And I really, would like to, ask for her hand in marriage, if that's okay with you. She'll be moving to the East Coast, but I guarantee you I'm definitely gonna be taking care of her and you don't have to worry about her. And he was so funny. He's like, yeah, time is moving on. I've never saying that.
That was my father's words. Now, my mom, on the other hand, she was like, what? Is he trying to marry you to get that extra base pay for having a spouse? And my mother knew about that because most of her brothers and some of her sisters' husbands were all in the military, right? So my mother didn't want me to be moving far away and then be sent right back home, like if it don't work out, right? So she was like, you just better make sure he ain't trying to marry you to get that extra base pay.
Yeah, mom was tough, man. I loved her. She was so good about that. Now, here's the other thing that was so cool. They were planning their parents' 50th wedding anniversary at that time as well. So, her being the youngest, everybody else has already got their mind on the gifts they're going to give mom and dad. And now I'm part of the picture. So I'm like, oh no, we're a team now. What do you want to do? And she was like, I don't know yet. And now in Korea, man, those people, they are so talented, right? You can give them a picture. And like just how y'all look on the screen right now, and it will look exactly like that when they paint it. So I was like, man, if you send me a picture of your mom and dad, I can have them paint this real cool picture, right? Number 14 may be like huge. And that might be like, the gift of the night. So she sent me this really great picture of them. And the way they painted it was so cool, man. Their faces look exactly the way they are, but they had them in like a prince and a princess type of background.
Egyptian.
Like Egyptian. I mean, it was really, really special. So it was so cool. I wasn't there because that was one thing too. Her mom asked like, hey, is she gonna be able to come back for that? I'm like, oh, absolutely. But, I'm not gonna keep her from doing family stuff. And actually before that, she also asked, because she kind of stayed back until the 50th. I was like, that's not gonna happen. kind of need her to come with me and kind of get situated. I said, but she will be coming back, definitely gonna do that. And it was so cool when her telling me about the event that night. It was so special and very memorable. And then luckily, since she was the youngest, she was able to go last and do her gift. So obviously, man, it just stole the show. And, I was telling her, that's when my legend started growing within the family. I might have been late.
You were in after that. And oh no, I was gonna say it's interesting, just when you spoke up and you said no, it would be good for her to come back. And I think especially nowadays, some people automatically think, oh, that's like he's controlling. It's a control tactic, right?
Oh, that was
right, because and I know like I worked in domestic violence for a very long time, but I always when it's genuine and when it is not, right? When it would be more controlling. And the reality is when you're in a relationship, it is touching base with that person, whether you're dating, whether you've been married for 25 years. It's just your life is you can't just do your own thing, like come and go when you please, right? And I see it sometimes in marriages or relationships, but then that's where problems start to come into play, because really it's like you can't actually depend on that person because you don't know what they're doing or you don't know what their schedule is. And then you add kids into the mix and stuff like that, it makes it very challenging. So I get what you were saying, in case anybody else was wondering, like, oh my goodness, this guy is controlling where she's going.
Yeah. And the thing about it is we had already understood the concept of leaving and cleaving of your parents.
So love and respect. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate talking with people who has obviously been married longer than us to, any points we can get. It's always great. So love and respect. How do you guys implement that in your relationship to keep it healthy?
We don't get historical, meaning that we don't bring up old past things.
Okay.
And we keep the crazy out of it, And in fact, there's a book out there by Emerson Eggerichs, talk about love and respect. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
That a man needs respect or desperately needs respect, and a woman desires or love. And so when those two things aren't given, when a man doesn't feel like he's got respect, he's not going to love his wife, and vice versa. When she's not feeling like she's getting the love, she's not going to respect him. But we understood relationships. We understood who we were, and we sat down and we had goals for our marriage. We talked to the nuts and bolts of what we've seen in marriages, what we liked, what we've seen in our own families. By the time Darrell and I was getting married, my parents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. His parents were divorced. So we had those two scenarios, like what makes a marriage have longevity? What's going to make our marriage have longevity? And so we had goals for our marriage. We sat down and we decided what was going to happen in and outside of our marriage. And just mutually loving one another, mutually respecting one another, and attempting to make sure that we're meeting each other's needs. We focus on meeting the other person's needs instead of focusing on getting what I want in a selfish way.
And that was one of the great things that Pastor Hayes told us when we were going through the couples premarital counseling. It was so interesting because during that second part, we had to fill out the paperwork. Neither one of us could talk to each other, right? Had to answer these questions and turn it in, and then we would find out at the meeting, right? So, me, I'm military. I'm like, man, I need to get like the highest score on this thing. Like, it's not a score thing, right? No. It's an assessment. Like, oh, my bad. But it was interesting. So we go to the meeting, right? Pastor Hayes is like shaking his head, looking at the papers. And I'm like, why are you shaking his head? Like we already paid for this thing. And he goes, and this is how he starts it off. In all my years of counseling, I'm like, oh no. Oh, boy. Right? Automatically kind of thinking the worst. He goes, in all my years of counseling, I have never seen a couple that looked so good on paper. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, right?
There's like, the competitive self.
Right. But he was like, you guys really, even though he said, did y'all look at each other? I was like, no, I didn't pay attention to her answer. Definitely didn't show her my answers. And he was like, this is really good. He said, I can really see you guys. And what he said was so cool. It was like, I don't just see you guys thriving in your own marriage, but I can see you guys helping others in the future. And this is way before we even thought about marriage ministry or anything like that. And one of the best advice he gave me, he said, Darrell, I'm going to give you one piece of advice in this marriage. I'm like, cool, Pastor, tell me what it is. I'm going to definitely get at it. That's how I am. He's like, your goal is to make sure that she fulfills every purpose that God has for her. Yeah, that's it. You do that, everything else will fall in place. And I literally took that to heart, right? It was like, yep, I know I have my job in the military, I'm traveling, I'm in ministry, but I'm also to help her out. And I shared that with a lot of men because sometimes, they got those crazy fables of that 50-50 and all this crazy talk. And I'm like, no, man, if you're the head of the household, your job is to take care of her. And it was like, they're so used to society's way. Well, what about me? What about my field? I'm like, you don't get it. When you take care of somebody else, that thing is reciprocated. Mm-hmm. It comes back to you in different ways. And when people get with that concept, they're like, man, I never thought about that. I'm like, yeah, think about it. If you're doing something for somebody else and it's sincere and it's genuine and you're not doing it, right, expecting anything other than this is just the right thing, right? Those are those tips that we share with couples, right? Put that other person before you. Like, yeah, but what if I get stepped on or what if my stuff isn't met? I'm like, that's the thing about love. You don't do it for other than that's just the right thing to do. And if you care about somebody that much and it's sincere, I said, don't be surprised if it comes back to you. Mm-hmm. So those are definitely some of those tips. And then another thing we share with couples is to find a mentor couple, right? We're so big on that. It's so many people, and y'all know this, even where you are, right? You go to those places, you see that old couple that like they've been married 60, 70 years and they still holding hands. You be like, man, how did they get like that? Like what does it take to have that same type of affection? And we always tell people, find a couple like that. We always tell them, we can't be your mentor couple. We're your friends already. So you already got us, but find another mentor couple. And again, it's not for somebody to be a referee, because that's not the point of a marriage couple. It's for somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, talk about the future, right? If you're bringing in a blended marriage, right, you talk to somebody that's done it before. Mm-hmm. So then that way they can just help cut down on some of those challenges that you don't have to run into.
And in addition to that, taking away the unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Getting rid of those and learning how to be authentically you. being trustworthy, being honest, and being able to be valued. A lot of women are in marriages where you talked about domestic violence, they're not feeling valued. They're not looked upon with respect as well. So and one thing about premarital coaching, it provides an opportunity for you to learn his and her role respectfully, and so that your marriage can thrive. It's no one person's role, and then also just marriage creates people to be vulnerable. So if you're not interested in being vulnerable in marriage, that marriage it really isn't for you. Perhaps you need to take a pause on it, and heed the red flags. A lot of times there's so many things that we have to put up caution tape, but we tear the caution tape down, the yellow tape and say hard hat beyond this point. We don't even want to wear the hard hat, and we don't want to stop. We want to go right on in the construction site that could be dangerous to us. But if we can just sometimes, it doesn't mean that that you're not meant to be. You just need to take a pause to resolve the issues that are at hand that is causing so much friction and discord within the relationship for it to be healthy. Because, there's no perfect marriage, but there are marriages that are healthy. And that's what you try to strive for. Strive for healthy marriages, and learning how to disagree, to be respectful and allow each other to have their own opinion, that it doesn't turn out to be argumentative.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Now, one thing I see a lot is you have people who will spend so much time planning their wedding and they don't actually plan for the marriage. And obviously you guys were very intentional about that, knew what you wanted out of the marriage going into it. What are some of the things that are important to really have those discussions about before you walk down the aisle?
Communication. Communication is key. That was another thing I didn't. And communication, honestly, take the gloves off. People, we want to get so defensive. It's not to be offensive to you. So there's no need to be defensive. After all, this is someone that I love, right? This is someone that I want to be with. So always be open to receive and to be able to give back feedback. Communication is so key. And that was one of the things that my dad told us when we were getting married, when he brought me in the room to both of us, when he let me know that I told Darrell he can have your hand in marriage, he said, but I want you to know you guys are going on the other side of the country. And I want you to know that I know a man that never sleeps nor slumber. And if you just rely on him, when you have your issues, talk about it, pray about it. Don't go to bed mad, try to really do the best that you can to resolve it amicably. And I think we've done that. Try not to go to bed mad. I mean, newlyweds, you're going to have those differences because you're getting adjusted to each other, but they're not deal breakers if you just tackle it and you let them know, like, I was really mad at you. I remember because we work in church ministry. And there was times when he would be at church for a long period of time. I'll be like, Lord, now he should be home by now. I was like, I'm like, Lord, you better get your son. Fix me, Lord. Get me together by the time he get home, because I'm gonna lock this room door and he gonna know I'm mad at him, right? But is that really how you should be acting if this is the man that you love? So we learned how to just call if you're gonna be late, because I'm expecting you, Not that he wasn't ever doing that, but at certain times when you're in church or at a meeting and it's a meeting that I didn't go to, just let me know that you're home, because I'm waiting. I don't know if anything happened. And if you know that we have a certain pattern, let me know. Because I said God on you all the time. I'll be like, God, you better get him.
And another thing with that planning, the marriage instead of the wedding, right? Talking to guys, especially, right? Because sometimes, when we're talking to them, they'll be honest. They're like, man, I ain't really have nobody in my life.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know what right looks like. Right. So a lot of times, we share with couples, wherever you are, whether it's your family, the job, at church, right? Just look at somebody that you just seem like you really admire how they're doing it. Because sometimes we're doing life so fast and realize if we just pause enough, there are so many great role models that are right in our presence. And I remember just telling this one guy at church, I was like, who at our church, looks like, man, they just got together. And he was able to point out this one guy, which we always talk about. Him and his wife just are awesome. And I was like, okay, now as you're watching him, just look at some of the little things that he does and see what are the things that he does, right, that you feel comfortable adding, right, to your style. Because sometimes, we're honest with people, they don't know what a good marriage looks like. And it's like, the fact that you want to do right by it, I said, we're going to work on that piece. Yeah. Right. And like Veronica said, we tell them, set some goals for your marriage. And that's a challenge for some people, but they don't have a goal for their lives.
Right.
So now we're changing the whole mindset. Like, hey, man, have a goal for your marriage. What y'all want it to look like? What do you want it to be like? Visualize. Where do y'all want to live 5 years from now? Right? How many kids you want to have? What do you want those kids to be doing? And we always tell them, when you're getting married, realize that you're modeling life in front of those kids. So that's another good reason when you're planning, right, for the marriage and not the wedding is, what are some things about myself that I need to put in check, right? Yes, she said, she'll marry you, and yes, she's wearing the ring. I said, but let's get real, right? On that night, you sent your representative, right? Your representative, that's the best you. So the representative brings it in, and then at the wedding, I was like, okay, I got to check out. Now the real you got to come in. So I was like, we got to make sure we get rid of those representative syndromes. Let's bring that real you up front. And one thing I was talking about, we always tease them too, like, hey, did you get a divorce yet? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, you didn't know? I was like, before you get married, you got to divorce yourself. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, man, we selfish. Don't you know that? We've been doing things our own way. We got these inner little instincts that have never come out, but they're going to come out, right? When we started, living with somebody and their little habits and our little habits, and you got to get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm not going to let the way this person roll the tissue or squeeze out the toothpaste be a deal breaker, like Veronica said. And people are like, are you serious? I'm like, bro, little stuff. You'd be surprised. And Mark and I, we would always compliment them. Like, you guys know so much within this 6th session of our premarital coaching that people have been married 20 years. Yeah. Because they will not, no, she just got to fix the toothpaste the way I want it. That's just how it is. I'm like, come on, man, is that realistic? And we always tell people, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Yeah. That's a question we always ask people, because if you want to be right, you might find yourself by yourself down the road. But if you want to be married, I think you're going to find some ways to look past that toothpaste and that tissue stuff. Yeah.
And just being with, and recognize the change. Because when you first get married, you're okay with how you are. But as you evolve and as things happen in your career, as the kids come along, things like that, just be willing to recognize when there's a shift or when there's a change, and then talk about it. Like, I recognize this. You used to like this, but I'm realizing when I'm buying it, you're not really using it. No, I don't like it anymore. So, and that's a part of being open and honest. Like, I used to like it, but now I don't like it anymore. Things change, And then another thing is even, because there's couples that get married with kids, whether they're adults or little ones. And then there's couples that begin a family. Always keep the flame burning, by during date, going back to the old school of getting a card or writing a note yourself. When we first got married and Darrell would travel, I always would take a sticky note, and he packs a certain way because being in the military, I already know what he's going to wear Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? So after he would pack, go get his shower, or even sometimes when he was going to sleep, I would get up earlier and I would have all my sticky notes written out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I would stick them in his pants pocket, or I would stick it in his jacket pocket or something, or his shirt pocket, or whatever it was, so that when he reached his hand in his pocket, he'd be like, what is this? And it's a nice little note, and especially like on a Friday, it was a real good note, for when he was coming back home. But keeping those little things to keep the flame burning makes it important, and don't forget them, try try to think of something new and be creative and be spontaneous. What made you guys connect in the beginning? What made you so interested in him? Why did you stop doing that? Did you ever ask her, why she stopped doing that? Did you ask her why? Or did you tell her that? Or what was it? Just always being, having an open line of communication before, in the morning when you wake up, throughout the day, just text. We know we get busy at work and things like that. Just send a little text, little things. Always talk about your day at night. Wind down, even if they're traveling or whatever, just wind down together.
Yeah. And you know what? It's okay if it looks different too, right? Like when, when you're dating and stuff like that, date nights and all that kind of stuff looks totally different than when you have a 3-year-old and twins, right? Like that was us.
Us too. We have twins.
There you go. And then there you go, knowing that just because it looks different, it doesn't mean we're in a bad situation. It's being aware and just being, hey, if, during COVID, we can't get out to eat because restaurants were closed. Okay, that's fine. Or we can't get out to eat because this is closed. Okay, just even having that time. So if it looks different, it's okay. Just being aware of the time and that connection, I think is the biggest thing, because people get caught off guard, like, oh, it's not like how we used to it. That's okay. Life isn't how it used to be, right? It does keep shifting, as we've said. And it's just going with that flow every stage that we're at, right?
Right. And one thing that we did, because we have twins too, thank goodness they're in high school now. But I do remember those days. And Darrell, what we wind up implementing, Darrell just decided, he was like, we sat down, he was like, I know you seem so tired because I'm out working. At the time, it was like when I was still home from maternity leave. Now I returned back to work. I'm picking up all 3 kids or whatever. He worked out his schedule, like, how about I take our older son and you take the twins? I can help out. I'll pick them up or whatever. And if he ran late, I might have had to go get the kid, get the older son. But the other thing about it is we each took one day out of the month on a Saturday. You can leave when you want and come back when you want, because you're always with the kids and you need that time to refresh. And I remember there was time, and I don't know if it was the reason why. I think one time I went to get my nails done and there was a lady there and she was like, where are your kids? I said, they're with their dad. She said, oh, he's babysitting? I said, no. He's watching his kids, There's such a misperception of when the wife has the kids and when the husband have the kids. And then I remember one time I took the twins with me and they were in their car seat. I had them sitting there. And the next time I went back, the lady said, my client was like, how dare her bring those kids in here? Couldn't she have done that on another day? Is she on welfare with the twins? Geez. I was like, no, I work full time. I have 3 children. My husband took the other. I took them and I needed to do whatever we need to do. I said, well, let me know when she comes back so I can educate her that everybody has. And so it was so offensive to me. But then at the same time, I was like, but I also had to educate people to let them know he's not babysitting his kids. He's watching his kids. Now, what do you call it when I have the kids and he's not around, so it's no different concept. We need to change that mindset as well. But what we did realize is that not only did I need a day to myself, he needed a day. So don't be selfish in allowing it to just be one spouse, but allow each of you to do it. And I'll let Darrell go after this. But, another concept is just make a picnic in the den.
Yeah.
When the kids are asleep, have some cheese, some apples, some crackers, grapes or whatever, strawberries. Your date night is now inside, especially when you don't have a babysitter.
Another thing, I want to make sure all the moms hear this. Right, because this is offensive, but I gotta let them know, gotta help them frame up, right? The way you take care of the kids, it's nice, but that is not the only way the kids can be taken care of, right? Allow your spouse to do what they need to do, because unfortunately, there's a lot of spouses that think, you know what? If she don't want my help, then I'll let her do everything by herself. But then you can't come back and say, well, you never helped me, I'm tired. I'm like, sometimes you don't realize you're doing that because it's out of love, right? You're just so used to doing it, but it's like, allow the guy to do it. Yeah, he might not put on the diaper the way you put it on. That's okay. Right? He may not do certain way that you did the food, right? He might have a game with it. It's like, play with the food. No, let him do his thing, right? If they got a little game between dad and the daughter or little boy, that's okay. Yeah. Because the child needs to realize there's a difference between how mom does it and how dad does it. And that's cool, right? Allow that time, because sometimes you get a lot of women, it's like, well, I need to go get my hair done, but I can't go because I got to do this. No, go get your hair done. Go get your nails done, go see a friend, because you need that time. That's that self-care that sometimes women try to push that on the back burner. And then we have to remind them, like, yo, just like you on a plane, right? Who did they tell you to put the mask on first? Yourself. It's a reason for that. That's how it works in a marriage, right? Go take care of yourself, right? So what? You come on, the diaper might be backwards, right? Still dry.
Hey, you know what? Exactly. It's so true. It's, you know what? Hey, we're not going to complain. And you know what? I've seen exactly what you're talking about in other relationships. And it's that respect thing, because somebody is being open enough and vulnerable enough to say, like, I want to take do this on my own and try this, especially as like a first time dad and mom, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, you've never done this either yourself. What makes you feel like you know what you're doing? I guess mom instincts or whatever. But yeah, when you take every time it's that knockdown, that can be tricky too, right? Yeah. And a lot of people say, oh, well, my husband doesn't do this or doesn't do that. And again, it's whatever is going on in your home, but being open to the fact that, yeah, it's not always 50-50. And we learned that when we had the twin. It was like literally, okay, you're working, I'm home, but guess what? There's like 3 and 2 of us. So everybody's on duty and everybody's helping. And Brian was really great with that, but it's something that you don't always get to see when maybe there's just one child, right? And it's usually later on as things go. But yeah, definitely it's a team sport. That's what I say. It's a team sport. When you need to tag in, you tag in.
Yeah, when people talk about, I was just gonna say, when people talk about the 50-50, like I always say, like, I thought you're both supposed to be giving 100%.
There you go, Brian. You're right. You're exactly right. And one thing we always tell people too, like, we get some couple, they're like, yeah, but she's so good with the kids. I'm like, I don't use that as an excuse, right? I said, what are you good at? And I used to talk to the brothers and they're like, well, you know me, man, I'm into sports. I'm like, okay, so you watch ESPN? Oh man, all the time. I said, so what if you did the night duty, right? And you give her a certain time, like, about 9 o'clock, you shut it down, I'm on duty. I said, so now you get to watch Sports Center, you're feeding them while you're watching Sports Center, you change, I mean, really, and they're like, exactly. And they're like, I never thought about it like that. I'm like, yeah, man, the best time you watch your kids is when you're watching a game, right? You give them a little Nerf basketball while you're watching a basketball game, make that part of that growing experience. So when he gets older, right, he won't say, or she won't say, well, I don't even remember my mom doing all this stuff. They will literally say, I remember walking around and my diaper felt different. He had it on backward, but it was okay because I knew he was with me or she was with me, right? So one thing we always share with couples is know what your strengths are and play to your strengths. Like for me, like I knew, like I'm a true military, straight A, dress right dress, need to be a certain way. So it was like, you know what, let me take care of the laundry. Right, let me take care of, lining up their clothes. Like, everybody got the little onesies. I'm like, no, not me. I'm gonna line them up, right? Monday, Tuesday through Friday, right? But it allowed her, that was one less thing she had to worry about. And then one of the things I wasn't doing well was the bathing, right? She was really doing all of that stuff. And I had to like, wait a minute, I'm not, doing my part. So eventually I got to a point, I was like, you know what, let me take care of the bathing part. And it was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, I got it. Let that be your time again to wind down. So it became like a tradition, right? It was like dad's gonna, bed us down for the night. And when I tell the guys that, they're like, I don't know, now you're going a little bit deep, Darrell. I'm like, no. I said, hold up. Let me go, let's look at this. When you come home and your wife's looking nice, you're gonna want to kind of rekindle the relationship. They're like, yeah. I was like, how much more rekindling can there be if she's rested versus tired. And you just see the light bulb over the head. Oh, yeah, let me, as a matter of fact, let me text her right now. Hey, babe, I'm going to take over the baby.
And it won't be so many no's. It won't be so many, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And, for the military families that, when the spouses are away, either spouse is away and they come home and the house don't look like it was looking when you were there. Don't go, whoa, what happened here? Like a train wreck happened. Go in, just start helping. Just being in the present sometime. And getting like, hey, I got the kids. I'll back them up the crumbs. You go take a rest, instead of coming in and complaining and being so shocked and frantic that the house isn't looking the same as it normally does. Why don't you help? Because when it's one person, they're not an octopus. They can't do everything.
Yeah.
You just get done what you can and keep it moving.
And one thing I would share for anybody that listen to this podcast and they realize they're going to have twins. One thing that worked for us was I was like, you know what? I don't know if it's going to happen or not, true or not, but I'm going to put them jokers on the schedule, right? So if the girl needed to be changed, I'm changing the boy. If the boy was hungry, I'll feed the girl. And eventually they got into that schedule where I don't know how it worked, but it was like boom. Everybody getting changed at the same time, everybody going to eat at the same time. We're going to roll this thing together. Mm-hmm. And it worked out. I mean, it was a really cool schedule.
And the Bobby pillow was my favorite. I fed them both on the Bobby pillow. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I was home by myself and I was like, wait a minute, they both were crying. Instead of freaking out, I was like, oh, I found how to do it. And I had them both on the opposite side. And because they're on the boppy, they're up at the right position, and I'm feeding them both, and then I burp one, and then I burp the other, and it's a lot, And I think what we need to do is make marriage fun. Yes. I think we're already a stressed people that we need to realize that I'm with my partner, I'm with my life partner. Let's have fun. Let's not be stressed out. Let's find out when we meet each other's needs, and when we are discovering that there's a shift and a change in the person, we need to figure out what it is and how we might be able to help.
Couldn't agree more on that. So just in wrapping up this great conversation with you two, let us know, what you're working on, where people can find you, and just how to get in contact with you.
Sure. So you can find us on Facebook under Alliance Seminars Coaching, right? And you can hit us up on our website, which is allianceseminars.org, and we'll make sure we email that to you for the show notes. And we're always working on something. That's one thing. We feel like our lives have been so blessed. It's like we have to give back, right? So a lot of times, like you were saying, the book Love and Respect, like we reached out to a couple of those authors, and we've actually created workshops, right? So if there's any churches or organizations, right, that want us to come in, and we even got it, on Zoom now. So, we'd love to do any type of relationship workshops, because we know and realize that no matter where you are in this world, that is a common denominator of marriage and relationships. And the more we can help somebody else not make the mistakes that we made, the better off everybody's going to be.
And there's no, wrong way or right way. Everybody can use a tune-up. And have new tools, new strategies. There's no blue book, no blueprint to it. It's just, for us, even though I had so many nieces and nephews and diapers I changed over the years, it was different when we brought our first son home. And we was like, oh, well, it's OJT, and so that's what made me just realize Darrell was going to do it the way he wants to do it. I'm going to do it my way, because he didn't ever live with any of his nieces and nephews. So I wanted him to experience being a father, and not just a father that helped make the baby, but a father that was going to be active. We're now getting ready for our oldest son. We're preparing for college. And I was telling, it's never too late in the day to add to your love bank. And that is just always sending a compliment. I made a tissue box one time. Maybe I'll do it again. And each day you put that you put a nice comment about each spouse. And on Friday, it's almost like that fishbowl game. You read it, you take one out and you read it. And it's all about compliments, something you did right, something you loved about the person that day. And that helped. And so the other day I told him, I said, I really appreciate you being an active father. Most kids don't have active fathers. They have fathers that fit the bill of what a father is, but not really taking, an active role in this process. So I was thanking him how, we are mutually being there for each of our kids to the degree that we can be while we're now healthy. And preparing them for life. And so always find ways to compliment each other or to share a kind word. It goes a long way because even in years, we can get so busy, but we can forget that the person is there.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, you two.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Really enjoyed spending time with you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.